Everyone knows the legend, a princess, a curse, a spindle's sting, a kiss to wake the world. What if that kiss was never needed? What if the needle struck and the kingdom slept instead? Picture a hall mid-celebration, goblets raised, violins laughing. A door creaks. A moon-thin point gleams. The princess pricks her finger and draws a breath, and doesn't fall. Around her, sound unthreads, a spear rings once on stone, a baker collapses over unbaked bread, the queen sinks into a dream before reaching her child. Outside, birds glide to earth like slow snow. Silence takes the throne. Only the princess remains standing, pulse loud enough to wear his armor. She steps forward, past sleeping crowns and shuttered eyes. Fairy tales promise rescuers. Not this one. This one begins when the world closes its eyes and one girl refuses to close hers. The night of Aurora's birth should have belonged to music and wine. Laughter rose like birds from the rafters, golden banners breathed in the warm glow of 1,000 candles. Then thunder split the sky, and every instrument choked on silence. From the doorway, smoke curled into a figure cloth black as midnight, eyes the red of dying coals. She did not shout, she whispered, and the hall leaned in. On her 16th birthday, the witch said, the princess will prick her finger and fall into sleep eternal. With her, this kingdom will wither and dim. The queen clutched her child, the king reached for a sword that felt suddenly useless. The stranger's smile was a rusted hook. She vanished with the wind, leaving only ash in the candle's breath, and a clock that began to tick louder than any drum. She grew in gardens where roses were counted like hours. Spindles were outlawed, needles hidden, old women paid to forget the craft of thread. Aurora learned songs instead of secrets, kindness instead of caution, yet the castle kept its breath shallow. Each birthday brought feasts, each candle on her cake felt like a courtroom witness. Guards smiled softly but watched doorways as if doorways could bite. Aurora chased butterflies, touched sun-warmed stone, pressed her ear to the seashells that promised other worlds. Still, in the hallways, footsteps always paused at 16 whispered, and turned away. Beauty bloomed, fear did not fade. She was a bright bird kept safe in a gilded air, taught every window but never the wind. And somewhere beyond the tapestries, a wheel kept turning in a room no one would claim. On the morning of her 16th birthday, the castle wore celebration like armor. Musicians tuned, kitchens thundered, banners glowed. Yet Aurora followed a draft colder than stone, a whisper that threaded her name through dust. At the end of a corridor that seemed longer than memory, a door waited, one she had never seen open. It yielded to her palm with a sigh the room had saved for years. Cobwebs like silk veils. A spindle in the center, old wood polished by time, its wheel turning though no foot pressed the treadle. Aurora's heart argued, curiosity answered. She reached. The tip shone like a star in winter water. Flesh met fate. A sting, sharp, small, ridiculous. She flinched, expecting darkness. Instead, the darkness flinched from her, and fled into everything else. Her breath held, the room listened. Aurora did not fall. She blinked once, twice, and heard the first thud outside, then another, then a chorus. Servants slumped mid-curtsy. Guards dropped spears that clanged like bells, bakers folded over bread that would never rise. The queen, running, reached with hands that went limp before they found her daughter's face. In the stables, horses slept standing, in the sky, birds forgot to flap and gently descended like leaves. A hush drowned the kingdom, thick as velvet. Aurora stepped into it and left footprints of sound. Wake, she begged, touching every shoulder she could. Warmth answered, not voices. The curse had struck, but the arrow had reversed, the only pair of eyes left open belonged to the girl everyone had tried to close. She pushed into the great hall, where light poured from stained glass in rivers of color. The twin thrones rose like mountains at sunset. Upon them, the king and queen sat as if sculpted by sleep, crowns tilted, fingers relaxed, faces emptied of thunder and laughter both. Father, Aurora said, and her voice broke in the vastness. Mother. She took their hands and felt heat without heartbeat, presence without presence. The banner sagged, the air smelled of beeswax and gone music. Her name, called in a whisper, echoed back as if the walls themselves were lonely. For the first time, Aurora recognized the shape of silence, not absence, but weight. It settled on her shoulders like a mantle she had never earned, and would now have to bear. From narrow windows she watched vines climb like handwriting across stone. Thorns the size of knives twined over gates and ironwork, stitching shut every exit. The curse was not finished, it was growing, alive, a patient siege. Aurora took a guard's sword, it felt heavier than stories made it seem. She hacked and dragged and bled, tearing a narrow mouth through the hedge. The thorns whispered as they cut, a sound like dry laughter. She stepped into a world beyond the walls and found it wearing the same sleep as within, as if the kingdom had put on a mask that fit too well. Behind her, the gate sealed, ivy sewing the wound closed again. There would be no retreat, only forward. The village square lay paused mid-breath. A merchant slept with scales in his hand, a baker dozed before bread that swelled without finishing, a child dreamed sitting up, toy horse forever mid-gallop. Even fountains thickened, water holding the shape of motion like glass. Aurora walked slowly, as if sound itself might shatter. She touched a cheek, brushed flour from a sleeve, straightened a fallen ribbon. "I'll come back," she promised no one and everyone. The promise warmed her mouth even as cold gathered at her spine. Somewhere among these faces were names she knew only from songs the nurses sang. Now the songs had closed their eyes. If a kingdom can hold its breath, she thought, then I must learn how to be lungs. At first, the silence felt empty. But silence has listeners. From the fog, shapes began to crawl, shoulders of smoke, fingers like nettles, eyes glowing hotter with every beat of her fear. Aurora tightened her grip on the sword. Steel should have promised safety, but when she swung, the blade cut nothing but air. The ring closed, the fog pressing in like a coffin. A breath caught in her throat, then heat rose in her palm. A spark, a pulse, a sudden blaze. Light burst from her hand, raw and merciless, carving through mist like sunrise through storm. The shadows shrieked, scattering, their forms unmade by brilliance they could not endure. Aurora stared at her glowing hand, the sun caged beneath her skin. And for the first time, she understood, the kingdom's last fire was hers to carry. "Don't stop," a voice said, as if spoken from two rooms at once. A young man stepped from the thinning fog, the crest of a neighboring crown stitched over his heart. His eyes were glassed with sleep, yet a thin thread of waking held them open. "I should be gone with the rest," he murmured, "but something tied me here, tied me to you." He swayed, catching himself on a post, then bowed with the memory of court. "I am a prince," he added, as if apologizing for a title that helped no one. Aurora saw her lowness lean, then shift. "If you can stand," she said, "you can walk. If you can walk, you can help." He smiled like a man remembering the word yes. They tested the edges of the curse together. When Aurora stepped forward, the prince steadied, when she faltered, his hand anchored hers. He felt sleep tug his bones whenever her light dimmed. "We are lantern and wick," he joked weakly. "Then we must learn not to blow out," she answered. Maps were useless, the roads had gone to bed. But rumors survive even when men do not speak. In carvings above old wells, in tapestries chewed by mice, the same sign appeared, a thorn-crowned eye, watching from the heart of the forest. "There," the prince said, tracing it. "There," Aurora agreed, feeling the word land like an oath. Two breaths, out of sync, began to find a rhythm. The kingdom slept, the path did not. The villages lay in twilight, houses sagging under silence. A farmer slept in the furrows he'd plowed, his ox collapsed beside him. A tavern door swung open and shut, though the laughter within had frozen mid-toast. Aurora stepped over still bodies as if crossing pages of a book where every word had stopped mid-syllable. She knelt beside a child clutching a wooden soldier, its paint chipped with love, and whispered, "I will bring you back." Her voice cracked, but the promise hung solid in the unmoving air. The prince watched her, weary but steadied by her stubborn tenderness. "Every vow is a rope," he said quietly. She smiled faintly. "Then let us weave a net big enough to catch a kingdom." At the forest's heart stood ruins strangled by ivy. The temple's stones were cracked, but its carvings endured. Aurora brushed away moss to read the words carved deeper than centuries. If the princess sleeps, the kingdom wakes. If she wakes, the kingdom sleeps. Her chest tightened, as if the air itself turned to iron. So it was never my life alone, she whispered. The prince traced the lines with his finger, jaw set. They chained the fate of many to the body of one. That is no prophecy, it is cruelty. Aurora's hands trembled against the stone, heat sparking again beneath her skin. The curse had chosen her as its lock, but she could feel the key humming within her ribs. Sleep found her that night, not gentle but invasive. In the dream's fog, the witch appeared, her cloak shifting like storm clouds, her eyes gleaming with cruel pity. Close your eyes, child, she coaxed. End your struggle. One breath, and your people will awaken. One sigh, and you will be loved again. Aurora reached toward a phantom vision, her mother's arms open, her father's smile returned. Tears blurred her sight. But beneath the sweetness lurked rot. She pulled back, gasping awake, her chest burning. The prince stirred at her cry, gripping her hand tight. Dreams are the chains she forges, he said. Aurora nodded, trembling. Chains could bind, but chains could also be broken. Dawn's light found them weary. Aurora sat apart, guilt coiling in her spine. If I just sleep, she said, they would all awaken. The prince knelt before her, eyes fierce despite his exhaustion. And if you surrender, you vanish. You are not their cage, Aurora, you are their hope. His words struck harder than steel. He placed her hand over his heartbeat. Do you feel that? It stays awake because of you. My kingdom still breathes because of you. I believe in no prophecy, only in the choice you make. For the first time since the curse began, Aurora's shoulders lifted, as if belief itself were a lantern set in her hands. The forest ended in a wall of black thorns, taller than towers, humming with fire. At its center loomed a fortress, its stones fused with bone, its windows glowing with sickly light. She waits there, the prince said, voice thin. Aurora felt her pulse answer with dread and resolve. They carved their way through, her sword blazing brighter with every cut. The fortress doors opened not with hinges, but with a scream of iron. Inside, the witch sat upon a throne of roots and skulls. So the child refuses her bed, she sneered. Then lie in mine. Aurora lifted her sword. Fear licked her, but it could not swallow. The nightmare would finally meet its dreamer. The hall erupted with shadows. They poured from cracks, from tapestries, from her very breath. The prince fought beside her, his blade flashing, but numbers swelled like tide. He cried out as claws dragged him under the swarm. No. Aurora screamed, and rage burst her skin into light. Her sword became a torch, her every motion a flare. She cut and cut, not at bodies but at the dark itself, until walls shuddered, pillars cracked. The witch rose, laughter woven into the storm. Strike, little sun, she taunted. Burn until you are ash. Aurora bared her teeth. If light must consume, then let it be brighter than prophecy could imagine. When the fury broke, the witch's voice filled the ruin. I too was a princess, she spat. But forgotten. Cast aside like husks while others feasted. My cradle was weeds, my crown a lie. And when I begged for love, they gave me silence. Her cloak cracked like wings, her eyes raw with wounds centuries deep. So I cursed you, Aurora. To show them what it means when beauty sleeps. If I cannot be adored, neither shall you. Her bitterness scorched more than her fire. Aurora trembled, but not with fear. She saw herself in the confession, a girl bound by others' choices, yet still able to choose differently. Then let this tale end not with your spite, she said, but with my defiance. The witch lunged, her cloak thrashing like storm-torn sails. Shadows clung to her voice, sleep, child, and the kingdom wakes. Stay awake, and all will rot with you. Aurora planted her feet. For the first time, her fear did not run, it burned. I will not sleep, she cried, her voice striking harder than steel. And I will not let them sleep forever. This tale ends with my hand. She drove her blazing sword into the roots that pulsed beneath the throne. The fortress screamed, walls splitting, thorns catching fire. Light burst outward, swallowing shadow, searing the curse from stone to sky. The witch shrieked as her own storm devoured her. Aurora's veins seared, but she did not falter. She raised her voice above the collapse, a cry that split the dark, I am awake, and so shall we all be. When the roar subsided, silence returned, but this time, silence broke. A bell tolled from a distant tower, slow and astonished. Then another. The kingdom stirred. Farmers lifted their heads from earth, children rubbed sleep from eyes, lovers clutched each other in wonder. In the palace, the queen gasped awake upon her throne, tears streaking jewels. The king gripped her hand as if fearing it would fade again. Aurora staggered from the ruins, her blade dimmed, her gown torn, skin marked by fire but heart alight. She looked at faces turning toward her, dazed but alive. For the first time, she felt their breaths meet hers, a chorus of dawn singing through one girl who had refused to close her eyes. They would no longer call her Sleeping Beauty. Aurora stood not as a tale of helplessness, but as defiance written in flesh. She had borne the curse, fought the nightmare, and awakened a kingdom, not with a kiss, but with her own will. Legends would call her the Princess of Dawn, the girl who turned silence into song, shadow into light. Children would whisper her name before sleep, not to summon dreams, but to remember courage. For sometimes fairy tales do not need saviors, nor princes with swords. Sometimes they need a girl who refuses the bed prepared for her, who lifts her eyes against fate, and wakes the world by refusing to close them.